So from a project, what do you call the project procurement is also an important element where you as a project manager will get involved heavily on the procurement side, since many projects procurement not it does not always visualize to our mind. It's always about hardware and software. Maybe procurement also involved in hiring people, hiring consultants for your project, and you as a project manager may be responsible for selection of these people, selection of certain vendors that you want, or selection of maybe certain components of certain areas of your project that you want to outsource because you don't have internal capabilities. Maybe you want to develop an API, a secured API, and for a project, and then you maybe you want to contract with WSO2 or a guy who is doing purely on APIs, who are concentrated on secured APIs. So maybe for a certain part of a project, you as a project manager might have to coordinate a procurement and draw up some agreements to procure that. So project, as I told, my project procurement management is all about it's a process, and all about purchasing and acquiring products or services, whatever it is, product or services, consulting services, or anything that it needed from outside of the project team. If it is inside of the project team, then of course you don't need to procure anything. So what is required to you to complete the project, any product or services that is needed from outside the project team is falls under the procurement management framework. So it's include you as a project manager, includes contract management, and sometimes you as a project manager might have to do administrative work to see whether they are delivering the contractual obligations that they are done, whether whether if you are hiring a consultant for some training of your project team, whether he's doing as per the contractual obligation that you have, as per the scope of work that you are contracted with him. So you as a project manager might be responsible for such procurement activities. So the project management team is responsible to make certain all procurements and meet specific needs of the project while adhering to the organization procurement policies. So you will have to you might have to do all these procurements, whether be it services or products. You might have to do within the laid policies and procedures of your organization. So if your organization has a procurement division and has its own procurement policies, guidelines, and this is the way to call RFPs, you have to take 3 quotations and you have to take certain things, then of course you will have to adhere and be in line with the organization procurement policies. Right. So so the seller, I mean the guy who you're going to contract with to take services, sometimes uh, mm, uh, sometimes it's say if you need to procure certain laptops for your project, maybe that seller is a box seller, and basically he just comes and deliver you the laptops and that's all. uh, but then we are talking something more greater than that, where the seller also manage things as a project. And since you're doing a larger project and you have subcontracted certain things to get done from a vendor, and you have to always see whether he fits on to your project, and he handles the procurement, he handles his sale. For you it's a procurement, for him it's a sale. He handles his sale as a project. So if you are a customer and is a key stakeholder, so here it depicts certain instances that a seller manage the sale as a project. And if you are a customer that is a very key stakeholder for him, then of course that seller is actually will handle you as a as a entire project. For example, if you can say, if you are a project manager for a large very large, what do you call, apartment complex, and 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 you're subcontracting a seller, a vendor for maybe procurement of a building management system, where all these automatic doors and openings, and for each apartment that is in the apartment. So then, say maybe you are a key customer, maybe you become a key customer for that seller, and then he agrees to manage it as a project, than a one-time delivery of items. And and sometimes sellers nowadays are very advanced, and the vendors are very advanced and very professional, and they have their internal project management teams, and they would like to handle the customer as a project. So for example, any system integrators and any firewall implementations, or any system integrators who will implement certain softwares, or any hardware implementations nowadays, even in the agreements they start giving project timelines. So if, for example, in IT world, system integrators 99% they handle sales as a project. So they will give you the project plan, so that you can fit on that project plan into your master project plan. uh, So terms and agreements, terms and conditions of a contract becomes a key input to the seller in terms of project, because you, in your agreement, in your deliverables, you will definitely specify in your purchase agreement that these are the days that these equipment should come in, and this is the timeline that you should deliver the software. So there, those inputs will be a definite, those things will be, what is there in the agreement will be a definite input to the seller's project plan. Uh, uh, just to discuss about some emerging trends and practices in project procurement. So nowadays, especially everything going digital, the procurement is now again increasingly going digital, and basically if you want certain services, if you want to find a consultant, you can advertise in your LinkedIn, or you can find a consultant, say your team needs certain consultant regarding certain areas of technology. And then you can reach your LinkedIn and search a good profile and invite him to come and join your project. Or sometimes these online bidding documents and is going online. So nowadays the emerging practices is more onto social and advertising on social media to find your suitable partners for your project. Um, then again, people are more advanced on the risk management, and you as a project manager, we had a separate session on risks, and even the seller is also nowadays are now concerned about risk for him in engaging in a sale. So risk management from your side and the seller side, now people are very more advanced, and more people are more concerned about it. So you may be addressing these risk management and risks, particularly in your contract. And for a simple example, if you're installing a data center, and if you're contracting somebody, you're the project manager for installing a data center for your organization, there are specific risk involved, risk of workman compensations, or risk of certain things getting what do you call damaged, damaged, certain items. So those things you can actually give into a contract, and and you can tell the seller that the seller should obtain an insurance until the work is fully completed. Then the insurance should be effective, and so that to cover all the damages that will occur into your property, as well as the data center equipments or existing equipments. So likewise, the risks that is involved, people are now very concerned, from your side as the guy who is obtaining the services, as well as from the seller side. He's also nowadays people are very much concerned about risk, so he might opt to take certain insurance and pass that cost to you to manage his risks. Then again, an emerging, it's a globalization, and as I told you, you can find contractors around the world, suppliers around the world, consultants around the world, and nowadays people go for projects, a mix of local services and as well as foreign services. For systems, as you know, majority of the systems locally it's implemented, plus foreign consultants fly down to your country to implement certain services. If you are going to firewall, maybe the first part of the installation of the firewall is done by the local supplier, and foreign, either they will log in or they will fly down to do the final configuration and for the go live. So likewise, nowadays your projects is a mix of local and international contractors. Supply chain, again, the supply chain management, the lead times management, how much of delay, how much of at the precise point the goods has to come in, the managing the entire the lead times of a procurement is also is an emerging trend, and you might have to, as a project manager, might have to know the basics of supply chain management, or else you might have to give it to your procurement division to handle the supply chain management, so that the lead times will be managed by them. Simply because there are international contractors are involved, and when you're planning your project, the activities that have greater lead times, maybe for your ordering some servers, and the servers need 3 months to come in to 3 months to for the manufacturing, and another 1 month time to come into your country. You might have to give priority for those activities in your project plan, and you might have to procure those things well in advance, before it gets dependent on another activity. Then again, technology in procurement, nowadays video conferencing, WhatsApp and other things are available, so procurement has gone to a separate level because of technology. And sometimes in government organizations, these supplier meetings, supplier presentations about them on products that they're trying to sell, they try to record these meetings on a video record, so that there are no disputes at the end. And so they usually, especially in government institutions, they record these sessions and meetings. Even these Teams meetings or whatever you do, you can record them and keep as evidences of what they have promised you during the initial procurement meetings. And also, you might know that in your organizations also, the trial engagements is a common factor now, that they call you for a POC, proof of concept POC. Even if you buy a small system, they try to the vendor is requested to do a proof of concept, do a trial run, and if that trial run is successful, then you enter into a letter of intent, or you give a LOI or you give your purchase order, depending on the successful of the POC. So in Agile, once again in Agile, so Agile actually it's all about try to go for a collaborative environment, beat your customer or beat your suppliers. So in Agile, what they say is due to the collaborative nature of working, it's more on a strategic partnership basis, and there's a greater tendency in Agile project management framework, in a practice, the vendor and the seller and the buyer try to share the risk and rewards that is associated with the project. It's more on a partnership basis, where since there is open communication, and your customer or the vendor is more involved with you in discussing the requirements. So it's more on a partnership basis that the seller and the buyer try to share the risk and rewards associated with the project. Tailoring considerations, as we discussed in previous sections also, tailoring these procurement processes into your project. You might have to consider the complexity of the procurement. So each project by project, the procurement process might differ depending on the complexity of the project. Last time you may be a project manager for a totally local project, and this time you are a project manager for a more international driven project, where you're trying to deal with more international suppliers and international consultants, plus with the local team. So the complexity of the procurement, the complexity of the project will define the complexity of the procurement, and hence you will have to adjust your procurement strategies accordingly. Then the locations, maybe you're on a global project this time, and people are scattered around the world, and and in different time zones, so your procurement strategies might differ from because of these factors. Government regulatory environment, the government and regulatory environment, the laws and regulations of your country, anti-money laundering law, anti-corruption laws, and you might have to be aware of those things, especially when you're working with the government institutions, and any regulatory approvals that you need, the telecommunication regulatory approvals that is required, or in fact even these days now in Sri Lanka you cannot import much. Now they relaxed last week, so the network equipments were basically banned, basically were on the banned list. So people had for the last few weeks had issues of bringing down network equipments and switches and routers for projects. So these the current regulatory environment has to be, you might need to be aware as a project manager in order to plan your procurement strategies. Availability of the contractors, yes, again, whether it's locally available, or you will have to source it from other countries, is again maybe a tailoring consideration of procurement strategies from project to project. So very quickly, to run through the procurement process of a project, as usual, the plan procurement management process will give you the how factor of how we are going to manage procurements in your project. And in this actually is very important. In this plan process is where you try to determine what that you need to require, what is required to get from outside of your project team, and how you are going to acquire it, whether we are going to acquire it from external or internal, whether we are what are the whether you are going to make it internal or buy it from outside, and who are the potential suppliers for this. So all these things will be actually planned at the planned procurement stage. To do this, so basically the planned procurement stage will identify the project needs, whether it's going to get acquired externally or internally, and you might at the planning stage itself try to identify certain potential sellers, maybe some certain consultants. You might at the planning stage itself you might reach them out and see whether their availabilities are there, maybe through the LinkedIn or other means. You might reach even at the planning stage. Then at the planning stage one thing you will have to keep in mind is that the project schedule can influence significantly the procurement strategy. If you have a tight project schedule and you have to deliver it within 3 months, your project, then it will have a greater impact on your procurement strategy. Sometimes you might have to fly down your consultant. Sometimes you might have to fly down, airlift certain hardware equipments, and then sea based or maritime based shipment. You might have to airlift it and certain things. So the project schedule has a greater significant on the procurement strategy that you have to lay down. Vice versa also, the procurement decisions also can influence the project schedule. Sometimes if you are trying to take a foreign consultant, maybe he's not available of the period that is you want him to be available. So certain procurement decisions you might have to tweak if your project within your slack periods, you might have to tweak your activities, and you might have to reshuffle or reprioritize your activities depending on the way to in order to adjust the availability of the foreign consultant. So vice versa, the project schedule will also affect the procurement strategy. If certain procurement decisions will also affect the project schedule. Maybe you take a decision not to procure certain things from outside, then the shipment dates is beyond your control, and then those things will influence the project schedule. In the planning stage itself, you will evaluate the risks, as we told, risk involved in making buy decisions, and also the risk mitigation actions that we discussed in short while ago also on your case study, to mitigate, avoid, and transfer actions that is required. Right. So procurement, in order you to understand the procurement, definitely the procurement part will come little bit later because you will have to understand the scope better. So to understand what to get procured and in your project, definitely the project charter will give you a high level of the business case, and how to get procurement, how to manage your contractors. Sometimes your scope management plan will also give you how to manage the scope of the contractors. Then again, last session we discussed about the quality, very important again in quality when it comes to procurement. So your quality levels that you have to adhere in your procurements, the quality parameters that you have to adhere in your procurements, it will be defined in your quality management plan that we did in the last session. Then again, your scope baseline, your WBAs, and the WBAs, the directory will give you the what components that you need to each activity, what components are required and what resources are required. If you want to outsource, if you want to take a resource, for DBA resource, or if you want to take external DBA services, database services. So your work breakdown structure in your work breakdown dictionary will actually will define what type of skill levels that is required for that activity level. The scope statement itself will give you the scope description and the other deliverables and the skills levels that is required for procurements. The requirement documentation is also important. So as I told you, the requirement documentation will be a major input for procurements. The requirement gathering, it will give you the security level, the information security level that you need, or whether safety level that you need. If you are building a factory, if you are a project manager for a factory, then requirement documentation will definitely give you the safety level that you have to you will have to adhere, the quality standards, the insurance levels that you have to adhere. Maybe in the requirement document, if you are building a factory, the licenses that you need to obtain, and the permits that you need to obtain in importing goods. So these things will be specified in the requirement documentation, which will be a direct input to procurements. The traceability matrix will also give you definite input on who have told these requirements. The risk register will give you certain elements of procurement needs. Sometimes your risk action, the risk response might trigger taking an insurance, which is a procurement for your project. A risk response might A risk response might trigger hiring a consultant. Maybe an information security risk response, maybe the risk response for the information security concerns of the project, maybe hiring a third-party consultant to do a vulnerability test analysis. So then it would trigger a procurement. That now you will have to take quotations for a vulnerability test or penetration test from a reputed audit firm, so that once your developers had done it, then you will get the reputed audit firm to do a penetration test and see whether your systems are secured. So the risk response might trigger a procurement. The stakeholder register will also give you information on the stakeholder relationships, and sometimes give you very insightful information for procurement. So you as a project manager, you might have to be aware of certain market conditions when you're trying to do procurement, whether these resources are available in Sri Lanka, whether good penetration testing auditors are available in Sri Lanka, whether you have to go to India or any other country to take services for penetration testing, who are the suppliers in the country, and the market conditions. So you as a project manager might have to be aware of these inputs. Then again, as I told you earlier, all these, your procurement will be bounded by your organization policies. You cannot give away with your organization policies. So your organization policies might have already pre-registered supplier lists. Sometimes you might have to call for fresh depending on your project, but then majority of commonly purchased stuff you might have. If you want your team to have laptops, then already your organization might have pre-approved supplier list, pre-registered supplier list. Usually organizations during a month of December and January put a paper advertisement and invite suppliers to register with them. Your procurement division put an advertisement and invite your suppliers around the country to register with them. So maybe they rank them and then get them on board as pre-approved suppliers, and thereafter if you want to purchase a laptop, then you will be taking quotation from those pre-approved supplier list. Then there can be formal supplier procurement guidelines. Then sometimes your organization might have contract types, maybe a fixed price contract, sometimes maybe a reimbursement contract, maybe you buy the hardware and plus any other travel expenses you try to reimburse to that supplier. So reimbursement plus contracts, fixed price contracts, time and material, majorly consultancy services are all time and material basis, and they bill on time and material on man-day basis. So these type of contract types will be there in your organization, and also contract agreement types will be there, templates will be there. So it's very important to align procurement when you're doing procurement with your organization policies. So you as a project manager, the techniques that basically is things we have already discussed in other sessions. Expert judgment, obviously, and again gathering market research, make or buy. So you will have to decide your cost benefit analysis, or whether to try to in-source it or outsource it. Then source selection we come to in a short time. The criteria that you are going to select these people will be defined at the planning stage itself. These are the evaluation criteria of a suppliers. We'll do it in a short time. So all these things we'll try to constitute in a procurement management plan. So the procurement management plan, definitely the how factor will be there, how the procurements can be coordinated, and how the procurements will be done, and the timetables of key procurement activities. Since now the requirements are there, you are aware of the project plan, how the timetable of key procurement activities can do, what are the procurement metrics, how you are going to evaluate it, the procurement metrics that are available, and roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder of your project. Maybe you have a procurement manager, so he's responsible for procuring certain things. You can tap the procurement department. And so stakeholder responsibilities, who is going to procure whom, and any constraints and assumptions in the planned procurements and that you come across, any legal constraints, any currencies, any what's the currency that you're going to procure of these equipments that you're going to do, and any independent and determine whether independent estimates are used. Sometimes you do a independent estimate, independent budget, so that you can benchmark the price that your that the supplier gives to you. Maybe for example, there's a data center consultant. You can hire a data center consultant and ask how much of will cost for this square feet number of to build a data center, or maybe how much will be an precision air condition will cost for this amount of square feet data center. With that, once the supplier inputs come, then you can use it as evaluation criteria and benchmark the costing that the supplier has given with the independent estimates. So your procurement plan will define who are the pre-qualified suppliers if you're bounded by the organization, or any risk management activities that you have to take, you will have to consider. So these things will be there in your procurement management plan. Then at this point of time, you will start developing, you as a project manager will start developing the procurement statement of work. So it is directly from the scope baseline, the statement of work, what to be done. If you're hiring a consultant, what is his statement of work? These are the things that he will have to, we expect from him to do. Procurement statement of work means basically the scope of the procurement. If you want to hire hardware, by this time you have done the scope baseline, and you know number of concurrent users that that the customer is requiring, and from your team, technical teams will give you the specification of the hardware. By this planning stage, you can start developing the specifications, and the specifications of your hardware and the quantity that is required, what software that is required. You need to say Linux, Linux version, Red Hat Linux version, the Oracle database version that is required, so that the scope of statement of whether the Oracle database needs Oracle RAC, Oracle data guard for replication, because the customer is asking real-time data replication to the disaster recovery site. So likewise, the scope of the procurements can now be dropped at this planning stage. And when you are executing procurement, it's a matter of copying and pasting the scope into your RFP documents. And also at the planning stage, you will together with your procurement department, you will finalize the formats for RFPs, for your RFQs or RFIs. So requests for information, sometimes you specifically, you're not going to purchase, but then you are requesting information from the market. You can put a paper advertisement saying that we request for information for a queue management system. So then suppliers around the world who sees that advertisement will submit information for you. Or request for quote, you will do an indicative quote. You request officially, you request for an indicative quote. From that, you know the price ranges. Each supplier will submit your request for quote. Obviously it might be a bit higher than the price that will be finally negotiated, but then you basically know the budgetary level. Then you can go to the board and say, look here, I publish a paper advertisement for request for quote, and this is we got 20 quotes from the region, and then this is the range of costing that is they require, and please approve me a budget for this. And thereafter you can go for a formal request for proposals with the scope statements of the procurement scope statement, which will include all these things, what the requirements will be there in the RFP. So as I told you, the source selection criteria itself will be decided by you and the procurement management team with your procurement department. These are the criteria that you are going to evaluate the the RFPs once we publish. So by now you have decided the scope of the RFPs. This is your scope. You have decided the templates of the RFPs, and then these are the criteria. Once you publish your RFPs to the market, when the suppliers quote for it, these are maybe the criteria, sample criteria that we will be evaluating. So there are n number of some criteria that basically procurement divisions evaluate vendors, and you might from your organization also know better. So basically just to run through, sometimes you give markings for the understanding of the procurement. Sometimes we find better, some certain suppliers really better understand your requirements, so sometimes there can be, you might give more marking on the understanding of the requirements. Obviously for the life cycle cost, the entire cost of the capital cost, and as well as the operating cost of the maybe for a precision AC, the initial cost as well as the yearly maintenance cost. So the entire life cycle cost of a precision AC, technical capabilities, risks, the approach, the technical approach, sometimes you give marks, and then of course the warranty periods, the financial strength of the the supplier. You will definitely have a ranking on it. Then the business size, whether it's a small business supplier or a good established business business supplier, you might have separate rankings for this. The past performance, the past project the seller has done, similar projects, similar data center projects that the supplier has done, then you might rank him in a separate ranking. The references, the customer references, the letters that he give, that he had done similar projects in similar other customers. Intellectual property rights, sometimes the IPs that they have, the unique IPs they have, the unique innovation IPs they have. So you might rank, you might rank basing on those things. So there are n number of source selection criteria that you can come up when ranking your suppliers. So just to recap, the procurement plan will contain the things that we discussed earlier, the timetables, the matrices, the responsibility of the stakeholders. Then you can come up with a procurement strategy, and basically the strategy based on the plan, depending on the as the tailoring needs. This is the delivery methods that we are going to get for this project. These are the type of agreements, the cost plus agreements, or cost plus reimbursement, or what do you call other agreement types. And the phases, maybe you might not, maybe again, as I told you earlier, longer the lead time, maybe the procurement phases can happen at the initial phases of the project. Shorter the lead time, maybe you can procure it then and there when the activity is closed. So you can have a procurement strategy for your project. Statement of work, as the procurement statement of work, what is going to the RFP, the scope of work. Directly derived from your scope statement. The description of the item that you want to purchase, the spec of the hardware, the quantity of the hardware, the acceptance criteria. The machine should be power on, and thereafter there can be you will run certain tools, and then only you will give the green light to procure the hardware. Likewise, the quality level from the quality plan, the currency, the payment mode. So this is basically your RFP scope, directly derived, and then the bid documents that is there.